A very good morning to each and every one of us, and thank you so much for coming this morning. It's our last formal meeting for this municipal year, and just to use this opportunity to say a very huge thank you from the bottom of my heart to all members for all your support throughout the year, and to all our guests and exec member as well. Thank you very much for coming and for supporting this scrutiny board. So Abigail Marshall-Cutting is my name. I am the chair for Infrastructure, Investment and Inclusive Growth Scrutiny Board, and I would like to have a quick introduction, for most especially for those who are watching webcast, and just for people to know that there will be a link recording in live or archived format on the meeting webpage, so people can actually watch us live, or you could watch us later. So for the benefit of those who are watching from home or from your iPad, PC, whatever, I would like to have a quick introduction so that you know who we are and the rest of the board. So I will start with Councillor Flynn.
Thanks, Abby. Good morning, everybody. Billy Flynn, Councillor for Adlam Wharfdale.
Good morning, Neil Buckley, Councillor for All Woodley.
Morning, Councillor Mike Foster for Ardsley and Robin Hood.
Councillor John Garvan, Horsforth Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Isaac Wilson, Wheatwood Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Michael Miller, Kippax and Methley Ward.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Nicole Sharp, Temple Newsam Ward.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Sharon Hamilton, Moulton and Meanwood Ward.
Good morning, Becky Atherton, Scrutiny Advisor.
Thank you very much, board members. Straight to the agenda items now, items number 1 to 5. Over to you, Becky.
Thank you, Chair. Item 1, appeals. There are no appeals against refusals of inspection documents today. Item 2, exclusions. There are no items excluded from the public domain. Item 3, late items of business. We've no late items today. Item 4, declarations of interest. Can I ask members to declare any declarations of interest in accordance with Leeds City Council's code? I will take silence as none. And finally, item 5, apologies. Apologies have been received from Councillor Lay this morning, who is unwell.
Thank you very much, Becky, and we wish him a very speedy recovery. Okay, right. Next is agenda item number 6, and that's minutes of the last meeting dated the 28th of February 2024. All of that was sent to yourself. So please, could I ask that we approve that as a correct record of what happened on the 28th of February. Is that a nod and a smile? Excellent. Thank you very much. Right. Straight on to our business of the day, inclusive growth update. If you all remember, you recall in September of last year, we had the refreshed inclusive growth strategy, which was launched. And this update today will provide an outline of some of the progress made since then in relation to the themes of the strategy and its 9 very big ideas, a full 1 year on. And we'll be having an update today, and it will also return in the autumn. So members of this board today have also been previously asked to be kept updated on the development of the social Progress Index, which we can all use as a tool to access data about inclusive growth at a city and a ward level. That update is provided in your pack in Appendix 2 of your pack. So in a moment, I will ask officers to kindly introduce themselves, but just to let you know that they would also be delivering a presentation today, and I will now ask Eve to introduce herself and the team, and then you can go straight into your presentation. Thank you for coming.
Good morning, Chair. My name is Eve Roothouse. I'm Chief Officer for Culture and Economy at the Council, and I have with me my colleague.
Hi, Graham Ponton. I sit on the Economic Policy team, and I've got responsibility for the Social Progress Index.
And I'm Councillor Jonathan Pryor. I'm the Deputy Leader of Leeds City Council and Executive Member for Economy, Culture and Education.
Thank you. I think Brilliant. Becky, as ever, is perfectly on cue. Thank you, Becky. So as the chair said, the report provides a high-level update on the economic context. It also gives some highlights of progress that we've made today on delivery since the launch of the Inclusive Growth Strategy. It outlines some of the work that's been done to update the Social Progress Index, and also gives some examples of the work we've done to embed the Inclusive Growth Strategy in the city. It's not a full and comprehensive overview of all of our progress. We are making sure that we prepare that as committed in the Executive Board report in September for the autumn. So I'm just going to start by giving us a context around what's happening in the economy nationally, regionally and locally. So whilst the UK sort of technically fell into recession in 2023, the recession is not a deep recession in the way that we experienced in 2008-9. And it's encouraging to see that the inflation rate is going down. And only yesterday, you'll have seen that food inflation is at its lowest for 2 years. And it is expected that inflation rate will continue to drop in the first half of 2024. And the main driver for that is the fall in energy prices following that increase. The way that we're experiencing these economic changes nationally is still quite unique and very much affected by COVID-19 and what happened post-COVID-19. But the one thing to note is that inflation is dropping at a lower rate in the UK than in the US and the EU. The other thing that's really important to note at a high level trend basis, and as kind of set out in the report, is that the main reason for economic inactivity is related to health. And worryingly, 1 in 7 young people are now outside full-time education or employment, which is the highest rate in nearly a decade. And more young people than ever are out of work due to long-term health conditions. So as noted in the report, we have begun some work with colleagues from health and from children's and the parts of the council to look at work and health and begin to look at customer journeys for people that we support across the city, where they're touching on those different services to see what we can do to improve how we work together to support those people back into work and therefore support their health. At a regional level, despite kind of Leeds continuing to contribute the most to West Yorkshire economy and performing better than the region, when it comes to productivity per hour, we're increasingly lagging behind the national average. Although the EY report that an optimistic view that we will keep pace with the national rate of growth by 2027, and perhaps that being a reflection of confidence in the kind of level of investment being made in infrastructure in the city and our ambitions going forwards. As highlighted in the report, in the local context, Becky, if you want to move on, thank you. You can now look on the Inclusive Growth website at the Inclusive Growth dashboard that we've developed to just delve in a bit more detail into the local data around economic activity, for example, and claimant count, which shows you what's happening on a regular basis. If you look at that, you'll see that economic inactivity is down from a previous peak of 23% in the city that occurred at the beginning of 2022, but it is remaining unchanged. There's kind of now a bit of a stubborn situation around that economic activity. Again, one of the reasons why we're doing this work to look at work and health, because we believe it is quite closely connected to some of those health related issues. The claimant count has also steadily been increasing since November 2023, but that would be expected in the sense of the interventions that have been made in the economy to reduce inflation you'd expect that to result in a loosening of the labour market. And actually, economic commentators are quite surprised that the labour market hasn't loosened further as a result of those interventions, and believe that that is in part due to the fact that that this is kind of a particular set of circumstances post-COVID. Briefly on city centre footfall, footfall is now about 13 to 15% below pre-COVID levels, but footfall for the whole of 2023 was up 2.6% on 2022. Consistent with other cities in the UK, what we're tending to see is a reduced sort of footfall during the week, but increased footfall at weekends, kind of demonstrating a desire to want to engage in retail culture and other experiences. And you'll note in the report there's some information there which just underlines that whilst footfall is down, there are other signs of confidence in Leeds city centre. So there's two major retail schemes that are currently being brought forward in the city centre. The first since 2016, which is the construction of flannels on the old Debenhams site and the storehouse on the old House of Fraser site, two major projects that are bringing forwards. Information that we have also suggests that John Lewis had its best ever year in 2023 in Leeds, and that basket spend exceeds footfall. So in other words, footfall might be down, but people are spending more when they are here in the city. Interestingly, I thought it was interesting to read around things like jewellery and beauty products and leisure time were popular. Clothing a bit more hit and miss depending on branding. We have done a recent survey on vacancy rate in the city, and it's now at 16.3%, which is the lowest rate recorded since pre-COVID of 12% in February 2020. So again, really encouraging signs that the city centre is performing well. There's other information in the report just setting out the confidence from the office sector in the city centre in terms of the investments that have been made by DLA Piper, a global law firm, and Lloyds Bank, who've committed to new offices alongside Arup in Westgate, along with the visitor economy, which continues to make a big contribution. So with that, we'll pop on to just a little bit of information about some of the progress that we've been making in delivering inclusive growth since September. So I'm not going to go through everything in the report, but a few highlights for you. The apprenticeship recruitment fair, which took place in February, attracted over 11,000 visitors this year. That's nearly as many as the number of people who engaged with all of our recruitment fairs in 2022, which shows you the level of interest in apprenticeships. I think increasingly people are understanding that a degree apprenticeship can be a great route into work and a way to earn while you learn and get productive in the economy. Just before Easter, we were pleased to launch a piece of research with the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, or CLES, which was about how women can be better prioritised in local economic strategies. And the report was called Women's Work. It provided some really fantastic highlights of the work that we do already to support women in the economy, but also suggested areas where we could do more and put Leeds on the map really in terms of kind of setting out why it's important to think about women in the economy and the productivity gains that can be had. You'll all note that also since September, we've announced the Transformational Regeneration Partnership. That's a partnership between the Department for Housing, Levelling Up and Communities, West Yorkshire Combined Authority and Leeds City Council. That was launched with a vision for Leeds, setting out a decade of city centre growth across neighbourhoods around the city centre, including what I suppose might be referred to as accelerator projects in each of those neighbourhoods to support the growth of housing around the city centre. And those accelerators include the National Poetry Centre, which received funding of £5 million through that announcement, and the progress around British Library North and the Royal Armouries. So there's many other updates in the report, but as I said, I won't go through them all because otherwise I keep you all morning. Other things to note, if you don't mind dropping the slide on, thank you, Becky. Other things to note is how we've been embedding the strategy into the city, the new strategy. So we've continued with our inclusive growth partnership events. These events are very much inclusive. The invites go out to all the key account businesses across the city, to our partners across culture, to our partners in the third sector and to elected members. And they're deliberately inclusive so that people come along, they can mix and connect across the city and understand how they can work together to deliver inclusive growth. The event that we had in January was focused on productivity. It was really successful. And the next event we have planned will be around place with a particular focus on transport. The Leeds Anchors Network continues to make really good progress. funding that we received from the Health Foundation has allowed us to develop something called a playbook, which sets out how we've developed the Anchors network. It's out there already for people to be able to use, and we've had peers looking at it from across the country and giving us feedback on it. So that's also promoting the great work we're doing and sharing with others. And we had an event just before Easter which brought together the business anchors with the established anchors, more predominantly in the public sector and education. And that was a really hopeful, really positive session where everyone spent time getting their heads around how they could work together with a particular session on mental health in the workplace and also on our priorities in communities. Thanks, Becky. If we can move on. So moving on to the Social Progress Index and how we're measuring inclusive growth. The first thing to say is that the Social Progress Index is already being used in the council in some really positive ways, which is fantastic. So the Best City Ambition that was updated recently has adopted formally the SPI as a way to kind of measure our progress. There's a new scorecard which draws on the SPI alongside the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment in order to show how we're progressing. The communities team have really embraced the SPI and they've used kind of some of the challenges that were reported in the data, like fly tipping or NEAT levels, and then they've used those to take a positive community action as a result, which is great. Public health are also now adopting it. I'll talk a bit more about how we've done some work on it to support them. And planning are also using it as part of an evidence base in their reporting and contributing to the local plan. So it's brilliant to see how it's starting to be embedded into our council work. So you can take a look at the new SPI now. It was developed in partnership with the Leeds Office for Data Analytics, or the ODA, and that means that they've brought some really great kind of expertise to it. So it's really accessible, it's really easy to navigate, and there's some great visualization tools in there. So I'd encourage you to have a play around with it, and volunteering. If you have questions, there is a way for you to kind of submit them and we can provide advice and support. The data range has been extended, so it's now goes up to 2022 rather than just to 2020. And there's more analysis tools for people to use. So the link's included on the slide, so you can go and take a look at your leisure. And I'm just going to have a quick whip through some of the new things that you can see. So you can see here that one of the things we've done is create a visualization that supports our commitment to become a Marmot city. So we've combined children in housing and health and housing to give you scoring using those indicators that enables us to understand how we're progressing in relation to that. So you can kind of have a play around with some of that information. Next one, please. We've also allowed now a comparison of SPI indicators against levels of deprivation for each ward. So you can kind of click around looking at years, looking at the indicator, and looking at kind of the different graphs by side. Carry on. We've got a new correlation tool as well, which is allowing users to investigate if there's correlations or patterns between indicators, components, or dimensions. You can pick multiple indicators and then you can see for yourself if those are related, how they're related, and really kind of try and dig in and understand some of that. And the slide that you've got there shows the correlation between mortality rate and key stage 2 attainment across all awards as in 2020. The most deprived wards, according to the indices of multiple deprivation, are in red, and the least deprived in blue. So you can kind of see the obvious correlation in that in that presentation. Do you want to move on, Becky? Thanks. So that's a quick whip through some of the new tools. What are the overall findings, having extended the timeline out? So the overall findings are that there is a reduction in our overall score on all indicators. We would expect that because the 2 years that we've added are taking into account the impacts of COVID-19. So COVID-19 did set us backwards on a number of the indicators. At the same time, we are kind of seeing some positive. We did see some positive changes in the foundations of well-being. So I guess the tool when we update it for the data of 2023 and beyond, we hope that we'll start to see the trend going back in the other direction again. But it will help us understand whether there are some longer term impacts of COVID-19 on particular indicators, as we'll be able to see that through the tool. Before we move on, one of the things to note is that a social progress index for the UK is currently being developed. And that means that we'll have even more ability to be able to look at how we're comparing in relation to the rest of the UK. Okay. Not by us, by the way, it's not us developing it, it's a third party. Thank you. And then at ward level, as I kind of said, most wards have experienced a drop in the overall SPI score since the pandemic. It has been felt most significantly in disadvantaged and inner city areas, which means that in effect that inequality is greater than it was pre-COVID. These are things that we know, but we need to remind ourselves by looking at the data, and I think it gives further justification to why we need the inclusive growth strategy and why we need to keep focusing on those interventions that are attempting to reach the people that need them the most in terms of skills provision and so on. Okay, so just by way of finishing off, and then really happy to take questions, I just wanted to give you a sense of some of the things that are happening in the coming months. Just as a bit of a highlight and reminder, the UK Real Estate Infrastructure Investment Forum is coming to Leeds in May. We're expecting almost 12,000 visitors, so you're not going to miss it. And the city will be really busy with real estate investors, local authorities, banks, including Lloyds, and other parties, including organisations like UK Catapult and so on. So it's a fantastic opportunity again for the city to showcase how we've changed over the past decade, and to kind of continue to build confidence in the city. It's also is a massive return into the economy locally in terms of the spend of people coming here for the hotels, the time they spend here, and so on. We've got our next Inclusive Growth Delivery Partnership in July, as described, and invites will be coming shortly, and you should all receive one. We'd love to see you. The 1 year on report will come through in the autumn, and we look forward to discussing that with Scrutiny at that point. And then, of course, over the year, we'll be working to make sure that we're widening the application of the Social Progress Index and supporting members to make the best use of it, along with colleagues right across the council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Eve, for that very brilliant presentation. Obviously, if you look at when you came to ourselves in September and you launched the inclusive growth strategy, there's been a lot of progress that has been made till now. So well done to yourself and to the team and to the city. When you mentioned about UK RIF and what it's bringing to the city, especially the hospitality sector, I can tell you now that from the 21st to the 23rd, anybody trying to book a 3-star, 4-star hotel in Leeds, fully booked. And this was like from February. So I do know the contribution that will make to our city. So thank you very, very much for that. Okay, you also mentioned about the careers fair. That was great. I just want to say a huge thank you to Councillor Mohammed Shazad, who joined myself, and we both attended the fair. So well done. All the rest of the board members deserted both of us, but yeah, we were there to represent you all. And I tell you, the number of young people that we saw there, I was very fascinated by. They were vocational education, though, so not university, and they were making shoes. And the queue there with the number of young people, I've forgotten the name of these shoes. Councillor Pryor, you've got one of them shoes, very brookie-like looking. That's it. There you go. There you go. So they were just showing the young people how they are made. And I thought that was really, what you can just tell, you know, from the diversity of the different exhibitors on the day, education as well as employers, was really, really commendable. So well done to that, and to the numbers that showed up that day as well, all day. And I think it was up to about 8 p.m. at night. Yeah, so well done to that. So thank you, Councillor Shazette. We've been going every year, but you all just deserted myself and Councillor Shazette this time around, but it's all good. Right, okay. Just to also let you know, if you look at there's the Ofsted report. If you look at, I believe, from your paperwork, it should be, just bear with me. Yeah. For adult skills, the outcome of the inspection results. Yeah. So members did ask for a session for adult skills for 2024 and 2025. So just to let you all know that will and we can confirm that it has been included in the update for the board or for the future talent plan for Leeds for the next year. So you did ask for that. So just to let you know. Now, can I quickly ask before I open up to the board, on page 13, Eve, and I think it's paragraph 10 that you've got where you said critical financial distress for businesses. Is that based on the view of businesses or just a specific criteria applied to that? So that's on page 13, paragraph 10. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So it will be analysis that Begbie's Trainer Group, as referenced in the report, have put together using data that they will have around the financial situation of various companies. What I couldn't tell you is how many companies are the source of data, unless Graham knows. No. So we'd have to, if you wanted that information, we'd have to just check back and let you know, but it will be some detailed analysis that organisation has done.
Thank you very much. I've got further questions, but I'll open up to the board first. Yeah, Councillor Sharp.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to echo the Chair's thanks for the report. It's, as ever, really well written, and I know there's a lot of work goes into gathering that data. Just on page 13, paragraph 12, you did say in a presentation that you're going to look more into working health, but I just wondered where you say more young people out of work with long-term health conditions. Is that, you might not be able to answer it now, but is that predominantly mental health? Thanks.
So, Chair and Councillor, I don't have that information to hand, but I think inevitably this might be an area that both this scrutiny committee and the sister scrutiny committee that looks at health might want to consider how we examine this in more detail in the next municipal year in terms of getting to the, getting some of this through. We have been going through all the data as part of the initial stages of this work and health activity that we're doing together as officers, but I don't have it readily in front of me now.
Okay, so could I kindly ask if when you're getting the data, could we also have the age group as well, those suffering from mental ill health? I think that would be very, very helpful. Thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Thanks, Abby, and thanks for the report, Eve. Same paragraph, actually. There's 40% of youngsters who are ill. Is there any link at all with the more deprived areas of the city, in the sense that we know there are much higher mortality and mobility rates from one side of the city to the other? And I just wonder if that was reflected in this as well, and particularly given the level of education that most of these people seem to achieve, which is just GCSE level rather than further education. I've got another one after that, if that's okay.
So my instinct would be yes, but I haven't got the data in front of me again. So my caveat would be probably to just follow up and confirm that with the data for you in writing. But I think your instinct is right. But because we know that those lower, we were just looking at one of the images on the slides, which shows that the lower achievement rates at Key Stage 3 do correlate with those areas of the city where most disadvantaged. We know we've got also the highest growing numbers of young people in those parts of the city as well. So we really do need to be concerned with this.
Yeah, thanks, Eve. I know public health have been involved in this long before the inclusive growth strategy got to the level it's got to now. So it'll be interesting to see what the result is. Second one was I got an email this week about a lady who's got epilepsy, and she quoted some pretty horrendous statistics for the number of people who are actually in work, the amount of discrimination they face, and the fact that they're, I think, around about 12%, paid 12% less than their able-bodied sort of colleagues. I don't expect you to know the answer to that one, but it indicates that people with serious health conditions are at a great disadvantage. I've had a lot of interest in adults and children with autism for a long time now. I have to say, I must admit, I'd missed out on this particular aspect. Be interesting to know from your contact with the Leeds anchors and the business anchors what can be done from a business point of view, because there's a limit to what we can do, obviously. And I know we got a recent outstanding for this sort of area of work that we've got, but it's clearly a matter for the business side of Leeds rather than ourselves. It'll be interesting to have a little bit more information on it at future meetings. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Absolutely. Again, the work that we've started between departments is I think going to be really important, because what we've been doing is exactly that, looking at the data that we have in employment and skills and the data that's held in health and public health, and looking at what that's telling us about particular cohorts of individuals that we need to support more effectively. And we'll use that data not just for thinking about how we might need to kind of adapt our services, but working with our partnerships like the business anchors to share with them that evidence and think about how they can build that into their work that they're doing as good employers. So there is a really well-established employment subgroup of the Anchors Executive Group, which is chaired by Andy Dodman, and he works with the other kind of his peers across the established Anchors network to deliver best practice on a whole range of areas, including, you know, supporting people with mental health at work. And that group did kind of a presentation to the business anchors. So there's already some really good work underway to start to share best practice. But I think it's going to be about how we can systematise that more and how we can kind of make sure that we're really targeting an objective about where our effort needs to be made the greatest. Employers do, I think, now really understand the value that can be brought, particularly from neurodiversity into different roles. And you do see that in areas like the digital sector, where people that have particular particular skills and expertise because of their neurodiversity are really good at particular jobs in that industry. And so you're starting to see that recognition by employers. But as I said, I think it's about our role can be about helping do the work to show where the biggest impact can be and how we can work together, both using our own influence and the influence of other anchors in that next phase. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Just before I call in Councillor Buckley, still speaking about the young people with ill health, has there been any, do we have any thoughts in terms of if different avenues have been created for these people who are suffering from long-term ill health to help them access employment? And could we also think about, what do we think about returning to working from home as well for those who particularly are suffering from ill health?
Thanks, Chair. Again, some of this is kind of best practice, best practice for employers. And so work that, we would do as an employer and would be scrutinised through the strategy and resources scrutiny committee. And that work is work that's shared through the subgroup of the Anchors network. I think there's scope for us for the newly established Business Anchors network to be able to kind of show and work with major employers about that best practice, but also to learn from them, because some of them will be doing things that we're not doing as well in terms of bringing those things back. I'll acknowledge, I think there's work for us to really do to get to the bottom of what the mix of issues are here. And the best way for us to do that is to think about the individuals and the young people themselves, rather than looking at it through the lenses of, say, employment and skills or health. And that's what we're trying to do through this piece of work we've kicked off.
Thank you. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to explore this business about productivity, actually. because it's a national problem, isn't it, that we haven't really got any increase in productivity. And I wanted to start on page 14 at paragraph 14, and a peculiar paragraph stating that production suggests the gap will widen slightly in the next 2 decades, and closing the gap by 2043 would mean productivity growing at 1.7% a year. And then they say, more or less, well, that's not going to happen. This would result in an extra economy, £13 billion added to the regional economy. But that's not going to happen, is it? And just taking this productivity situation of Leeds in particular, and you mentioned there a phrase, best practice for employers. That's presumably best practice for employers for individual employees, not for the overall productivity of the city. And I'm just wondering whether the council, in particular, being a major employer, is now encouraging people to work more from an office rather than from home for various reasons. But the next point I wanted to make was a completely different point on the Connecting Leeds strategy on page 18. And it's talking about developing a business case with the combined authority for the mass transit system. And I just wanted to get confirmation that Leeds is going to be put first, second and third in this project, because the mayor, being mayor of West Yorkshire, will be under all sorts of political pressure to deliver lines from Huddersfield to goodness knows where, Wakefield to goodness knows where. And yet it's Leeds, which is the city which provides all the growth and the biggest economy. And it's vital that Leeds is centre of that scheme, in my view. And finally, Chair, if I may, on page 20 at paragraph 37, this refers to the Armouries Museum event focused on productivity. During the event, it was reaffirmed that despite Leeds facing challenging times, the city's resilience, investment pipeline and upcoming opportunity around innovation indicate that 2024 is a year for transition with more stability to come. Well, that's interesting. That's exciting, isn't it? More stability to come. Could you just say something about that, please?
Thanks, Chair. So first on productivity, I think it is a puzzle, isn't it? That it's talked about a lot in the context of economic analysis. I think having attended a kind of briefing, an economic briefing from lead economist at Lloyd's just before Easter, interestingly, the main thing that he talks about that policymakers are concerned with is skills, and the fact that in order to kind of achieve kind of some of this the productivity growth that we want, actually we need to focus on people needing the skills to be able to meet the kind of growth in the different parts of the economy. I'm not saying that productivity alone is going to be solved by skills, but I'm just sharing. It was interesting that the perception of a kind of leading economist from one of the major banks saying that all policymakers are focusing primarily on skills. So I think we're doing the right things, kind of focusing on our future talent plan and thinking about how we can play our part in ensuring that people in Leeds get the skills they need to be able to be effective in the emerging economy. And the more we do, more we can think about that, the better. In relation to the point about working from home or office, I'll let Councillor Pryor come in on that one, because I think it's more of a question from the Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Committee rather than this, but he may want to comment. In relation to the mass transit business case, the The West Yorkshire Combined Authority Board met before Easter at the end of March to consider the strategic outline case, which has now been submitted to the DfT for their consideration. It set out 2 initial lines as being put forward as priority. One of them one of them described as like an East Leeds line, but some St James's and connecting on, and one the Leeds Bradford line being described as the 2 first priority lines. So exactly as you've described, they've identified that those have the highest potential to deliver economic return in the first phase in that strategic outline case. So that is what's been submitted into Treasury. We'll be following the model that Treasury requires us to, which is a strategic outline case, then an outline business case, then a full business case to be able to proceed. So colleagues in the Combined Authority will now progress with the outline business case with involvement from officers in Leeds City Council, both from highways and transportation, but from regeneration and from economic policy, so right across city development, in order to kind of work alongside them to ensure that the economic impacts for Leeds and what Leeds needs is represented in that outline business case as we go forwards. So that's around mass transit. And then 2024 in terms of confidence, I think the work that's been done by the city over the past decade has put us into a position where we've got a huge amount of confidence from the private sector in terms of investment in the city. And it takes a long time to win that confidence. And I think that's because there's been sort of consistency of approach in terms of the way that we've set out the plan for example, the development of the South Bank and the regeneration of the South Bank, and then how that's come forwards. And delivering on those plans has meant that the private sector continues to have confidence to invest in the city, and that confidence remains. And I think the announcement by the government around the partnership of the Transformational Regeneration Partnership and the investment zone, they all send really important signals to the private sector to say the public sector are making some investment in infrastructure, come along and match that, because we know the private sector is where the heavy lifting has to be done. So that public sector investment is resulting in us seeing that private sector having the confidence to want to continue to invest. And signs suggest that although it's tough borrowing, I know for the property sector, having spoken to some people in that sector recently, their confidence still remains in the city. So we should this year see, alongside that public sector investment, a continuation of private sector support. So I hope that kind of addresses the questions. And Councillor Pryor.
Yeah, I think on the working from home point, I think it's a really balanced argument. I think there are some clear benefits of working in an office, whether those are relationships with other employees. I think in general it is better for employees and employers. But what I would say as well is the labour market at the moment is a market in a true sense of the word. There are so many jobs out there which are offering more and more time working from home. And I think any organisation that becomes too draconian about working in the office will lose employees and lose good employees. So it has to be that balance. We don't want to kind of push so far we end up losing people to other organisations. But do I want to see there being a certain percentage of time where people are in the office? Absolutely. And I think that's true of every organisation I speak to in the city. Everyone wants to offer some level of flexibility, but with some time where people are in and speaking. In terms of the tram system and Leeds being at the centre, you're absolutely right that Leeds is the main economic driver of West Yorkshire. But we also can't look at Leeds in isolation. Over the past few years, I've worked in both Dewsbury and Castleford, and I've commuted out of Leeds to do it. And whenever I got the train to go to Dewsbury or Cass, I was the one person getting on the train to go in that direction at 8 in the morning, while hundreds of people were getting off the trains, travelling from these places to work in Leeds. And I suppose it links to your later point about those companies and, companies who are choosing to invest in Leeds. They're choosing to invest because of the labour market we have here. And those are people who live in Leeds, but they're also people who live in West Yorkshire. And I think a key aim of mass transit across West Yorkshire has got to ensure that those larger businesses have got access to a larger labour market. So yes, Leeds is the primary economic driver, but I don't think we can look at it in isolation. We need to look at how we link up Leeds to all the suburbs of Leeds, but also everywhere in West Yorkshire as well. It's two sides of the same coin. I don't think we can look at one by itself.
Thank you very much. Still on page 14, I'm talking about productivity. So the WICA, the reference you've also made here in terms of productivity is that we're not retaining a lot of our young people from universities. Do you know why that is a problem?
So Leeds actually is a sticky city in terms of retaining a lot of its graduates, but we do retain fewer graduates from Leeds University as it's a Russell Group university, and you tend to see that some of those, because some of the students that come, they pull students from a broader geography in the first instance. So a lot of those students may go back to work where they've come from in the country, or to another part of the UK because they're more mobile. We can in future reports give a bit more information about this, but I can't remember the last time we had data about this, Graham. Can you?
Yeah, it's 2017.
2017. So part of our challenge is not having the up-to-date data from the universities about the performance in relation to this.
Okay, so from what you have given, the stats here is from 2017 because it's showing the level is very low for retaining students with qualifications, and that's in West Yorkshire. Page 14 and paragraph 15, the WICA assessment. I'm just wondering if we're struggling to retain them. That's where I'm driving at.
Yeah, so I don't. I will happily come back around this in the future, because part of the reason we don't have the data is to change the way they collect the data, and that's why there's been a lag. So they've required universities to collect data in a different way, which means that we haven't had the data come through yet. I don't know, Graham, do you know when we're expecting any data?
It's a paid-for service. It's a commercial service.
Okay.
So that's why we haven't got it.
Sorry, just if people didn't hear that, because Graham hasn't got his microphone on, it's a paid-for service, and that's why we don't personally have the data. What we can do is check with the combined authority to see if they have the more recent data, and we can potentially work with them to secure that data for the region through WICA and give an update that way, rather than incurring the costs of accessing the data ourselves.
Board members, any other question? Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this just sort of relates to the SPI system and how we use it within the council to prioritise their spending. As I see it, there's two maps that the council produce to reflect deprivation. We've got the SPI index, which we're all familiar with, but there's also another one, which is an amenity map of deprivation. And I think I have mentioned this before, but I've never really received a proper explanation. But if you look at the two maps, they completely contradict one another. If you look at the SPI map of deprivation, it will show you as the inner wards as the areas that are most deprived. But if you look at the amenity map, it shows you as the outer areas of Leeds as being the most deprived. So what it's actually saying is that the inner wards have the most amenities, and yet they still score the lowest on the SPI index. So I'm trying to understand what's going on there. Are we over investing into areas that just simply that money will not now improve the SPI numbers for those communities? I suspect, my feeling, I'd like a comment on this one, that the SPI map simply reflects the housing type, value, density and availability. And the only way that you'll level the city up, it's not about dividing the wealth amongst the city. It's almost about dividing the poverty amongst the city, so that everybody scores similar scores on the SPI rating and everybody's treated with the same level of priority.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. I'll take that one. So I'm not familiar with the amenities map, and that we certainly haven't overlaid it onto this yet. I suspect there'll be quite a lag in terms of the amenity provision and the effects from that. And I think the social progress index will give a slightly speedier response to what we're seeing. So I would imagine if we looked at the amenities map in 5 years' time and see how it relates to SPI, it could be more of a correlation, less of a disparity of what, like the one you're talking around. In terms of the SPI itself and it being indicative of just the housing side of things, I mean, that's the whole idea of the SPI. It gives a good spread of all components. It's not just housing. And as we go on over time and have more data within each of those components, and we look at them over a longer period of time, and we look at them with some of these new tools that we have relating to Marmot City, relating to being able to correlate each of the individual indicators like housing and crime, like health, well-being, and let's say, for example, inclusiveness in that particular ward area. I think the correlations will become clearer of what it actually means. And when we do some further deep dive analysis on this, which we haven't done yet because it's very, very new, I think those are the sort of things that we will pull out. The communities teams, as you've said, are very strong on this, and they're doing some analysis for us on this one, as are the health and the health teams through Anthony Cook as well. So I think we've got a few different angles to look at it from.
I know you talk about the time lag between the two maps, but the best city ambition is actually going to make things worse, because that's designed to focus the council's finances at the areas that are scored as the poorest scoring on the SPI index. So I don't see how the best city ambition now is going to improve amenities in the outer areas.
I'm not familiar with this amenities map, and if you want to send it to me, I'll have a look. But forgive me if I'm hearing this wrong. Are you saying that at the moment the amenities map demonstrates that we as a council target greatest resource at the areas of greatest deprivation? Is that the complaint?
No, the complaint is you're ignoring the outer communities.
So you're saying there are more amenities where there's a higher area of deprivation, is that right?
No, I'll repeat. The inner communities have enough amenities and the outer communities do not have enough amenities. I can't explain it any simpler than that.
So the aim of the social progress index is to look at where there is deprivation most and in different types of deprivation, so we can target amenities to where they are most needed, so we can make the greatest difference. That's the point of the SPI. But as I say, I've not seen this amenities map, so I'm happy to have a look at it if you want to send it over.
Okay, sorry, could I ask, still talking about that paragraph and the SPI, when you say there's been a drop in from the report, there's been a drop in the score, and then for opportunities, so 2018 there was 53.3, and 2022 you've got 48.6. What do you mean by that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, on this one, there's the index is made up of a score, an index score. It's not a percentage, and that score is built up of several different indicators around that topic, essentially, what component, as we like to call it. And a drop, it's more desirable to have a higher score across all of the SPI. And some of the initial findings that we've come across in our initial analysis, for example, the SPI overall score, 31 of 33 wards have had a slight drop between 2020 and 2022, and the average drop is 3.5 index points. So it's not a percentage, it's an index point. So it's
So I think the key thing is it's giving you an indicative view as to our progress overall, and to really understand what's happening then in each ward, you need to delve down into the specific indicators across the three. the three components, because we haven't got the slide in my deck, but if you remember, there's a slide that shows the three different subject areas and then the multiple indicators that are used against each one. So what's happening is that there's a score against each one of those, which is then summarized up to give you that indicative overall score. And so you're seeing kind of an overall trend through that. But then, going back to the previous question, what you need to then do is look ward by ward, because at the high level with that single score, what you might miss is then looking into particular areas where there could be a particular ward could be stronger than others in different components of the index.
Thank you very much. Board members, any other questions? Yes, Councillor Gavani.
Yeah, just thinking about the SPI, that in outer wards that score very highly, there are still pockets of deprivation which are hidden. I'm sure we've asked before about being able to drill down into these wards, and I know you probably couldn't do it to street level, but sub postcode level. And is that something that's being looked at?
So yeah, we did look at that with the ODI team for this update, but we haven't got all of the data across all of the indicators at that level. So it's not something that we've kind of completely disregarded as something that we may be able to do, but we can't currently do it for all of the indicators.
Yeah, if I can just add to that as well, out of the 45 indicators, 27 of them are available at postcode. And so what we would welcome is a one-to-one with ward members, and where we can go to that level and have a little look in a little bit more depth at their particular ward. So if you're interested in that, please get in touch.
Thank you. Any supplementary question? Thank you. Just looking at page 18, and thank you very much for the update on the women's launch, which was women's work, which was launched in March. Obviously that was last month, which was also International Women's Month. I would just like to know, in terms of updates from the recommendations, what do you have at the moment in terms of the barriers that you're going to use to tackle? What have you got down in terms of the means in tackling the barriers that you have mentioned in the report?
So thanks, Chair. We literally launched it the week before Easter, and this is my first day back. So can I come back to you on that one?
It was a launch that both myself and Eve were at. Really fascinating piece of work and quite a substantial document. I think the point was made at the start that this wasn't the start of the work, but nor should it be the end. There's a massive economic disbenefit to excluding women from huge amounts of workplaces. I know, obviously, I appreciate this is the last scrutiny meeting of the municipal year, but the report was so substantial, it could even be a full piece of work for a future scrutiny board. So maybe something that next year's scrutiny board might want to look at.
Okay. Thank you very much. Members, take note of that. All right. Okay. So page 19, there's one more from myself regarding the information about the innovation arc. Could you kindly help me with how does that improve in the city? How will that improve the productivity in the city, to be more precise?
So, Claire, are you referring to the first paragraph?
Yeah, of page 19.
Yeah, of
under
course.
productivity.
Yes, happy to. So the innovation arc is an area which stretches broadly from the location of Nexus at the University of Leeds and the university site through the LGI site, then on to kind of the West End and through to the British Library North location, where we hope that will be located at Temple Works. It is the kind of physical delivery around our innovation vision, which is one of the big ideas in the inclusive growth strategy. So the innovation vision is about stimulating innovation, which will create a healthier, a greener and more inclusive future. We've got a whole range of kind of programs that we're doing to support more people to become entrepreneurs, to develop businesses that have the potential to solve those challenges, not just for the people of Leeds, but globally. And that work's been ongoing for some time off the back of us participating in the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Week programme between 2018 and 2020. The physical delivery through the innovation arc is to create spaces and places for those businesses to locate in and to grow in the long term. And last year, we put in place a spatial planning document for that part of the city, which describes how people who are developing in that part of the city must have regard to thinking about the purpose of those spaces and places for innovation. The money that's then reflected as one of the neighbourhoods in the Leeds vision. There is money that has come through the combined authority through what's known as the Investment Zone Initiative, and there is £20 million worth of capital earmarked for a development within the innovation arc, which is at the teaching hospital site in the city centre, at the LGI site, where when they build their new hospital, they will release land, which they're going to bring forward for the purpose of the innovation. And the first asset on that site is the old medical school. So £20 million of capital will be going towards the old medical school and bringing that forwards for a health innovation hub as part of that development. So that will act as the next a major catalyst for the development of the innovation arc, creating the spaces for those companies, whilst we continue to do the work to nurture those companies in the economy.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Board members, any other questions? All right, thank you. So our actions from this agenda item, members are asked to note the progress made in delivering our collective ambitions set out in the Leeds Inclusive Growth Strategy and agree any appropriate scrutiny board actions that may arise from this report. We also are asked to note the updated SPI index for 2024, which is a tool used to monitor our progress on inclusive growth at a city and ward level, which obviously you could also see in your packs. So you also need to note a 1-year-on report to Executive Board setting out progress on the delivery of inclusive growth will be published in autumn this year, with the option to also provide an update to our scrutiny board. So yeah, on behalf of the board, Eve, we just want to say a huge thank you to yourself and obviously to your team as well. And we would also await some of the information that you need to feed us back with. And yeah, on behalf of all of us, just thank you very much. And of course, our executive member as well. We're truly grateful. Have a lovely afternoon. And we've got 5 minutes break now, everyone. Have some cup of tea and something to eat. Okay, welcome back, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Agenda item number 8, 100% digital Leeds update. And first of all, I want to say huge thank you, Jason and your team. Wonderful report. There are certain reports you read through and you just feel good about it. I just didn't feel good. I felt very proud about this one. So huge well done to yourself and to your team. So this report provides an update to each and every one of us about the 100% digital program since April of 2023, when the board received its last update. So the report includes some examples of the brilliant work that this team includes testimonials as well. We have received from partners and stakeholders too. So I will now call on officers to kindly introduce themselves, starting with yourself, Jason.
Thank you, Chair. Jason Tootin, Head of 100% Digital Leeds.
And I'm Amy Hearn, Digital Inclusion Manager, 100% Digital Leeds.
So in a moment, I'm happy to take members through very briefly through some of the examples that are included in the report. But first, I'm just going to hand over to Amy, who's going to do a short presentation setting the work in wider context.
Thank you. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the history of 100% Digital Leeds and some of the way that we work, so that you can understand a bit about that. And Jason will give a run through of some of the examples in the report. So this is a brief timeline of 100% Digital Leeds. So we have been, the work has been established in 2016 by instigated by a previous iteration of this board, which launched a report into levels of digital inclusion and exclusion across the city. And that led to the formation of the team in 2018. This was the first work of its kind anywhere in the country, and was still quite unique in Leeds to have a dedicated and permanent team working on digital inclusion, and they're seen to be leading the way across the country in the way that we work and the work that we do. Since then, we have become a permanent team and then established an approach that's been replicated across the country and have expanded in size as well. So this is just explaining a little bit about how we position digital inclusion. So we see digital inclusion as an enabler. It's about everybody being able to make an informed choice on how they utilise different digital tools and services in a way that will benefit them and make their lives easier. In order for people to be able to make an informed choice, we need to remove some barriers. And those barriers include people having the confidence in their own abilities to utilise digital and confidence in the digital tools and services, that they're not going to get scammed or ripped off, etc. An understanding of how engaging with digital tools and services might benefit them personally. So lots of people who don't have experience of that and have a preference for face-to-face, but face-to-face services are often inaccessible or less accessible potentially than digital services for people that have mobility issues, struggle to move around the city, or mental health issues. Those groups are also people that are more likely to be digitally excluded. So when they're saying no, they don't want to use a digital tool, it might be because they don't understand the potential personal benefit of them engaging with that. And that can be exacerbated by their own lack of skills or affordability of connectivity as well. So people can, and different groups can face one, more, or all of those barriers, all in different ways. They all exacerbate each other. And so we want to work to remove as many of those as possible, not to make anybody do anything digitally, but to give everyone the same level of choice as we all have on a day-to-day basis. So in regards to the scale of potential digital exclusion in Leeds, so digital inclusion exclusion is really difficult to measure because there are multiple different barriers, as I mentioned, and that inclusion or exclusion is not a static state. So we can support somebody with one of those barriers and then they can face a different barrier the next day due to a change in circumstance. What we can look at is the various different numbers of people in communities of interest or geographical areas that are more likely to be digitally excluded because of their circumstance. And these figures here taken from the Leeds Observatory indicate some of those levels of numbers to give a sense of scale. So the 100% digital Leeds ambition, as I mentioned, is for everybody needs to have an equal opportunity to use the digital tools, technology and services available in the right way for them. Because that digital exclusion is not an on-off switch and is not static, we don't look to identify ourselves, and because we're a very small team, we don't look to identify ourselves, individuals in the community, sort of digitally include them. We look to work with the different partners from all sectors across the city that are engaging with and offering services to people that are more likely to be digitally excluded. And then we work with them to embed digital inclusion, awareness and support within those services in a way that's unique to meet the unique needs of that particular community that they serve, and based on the understanding and information that those organisations get through working with those communities on a day-to-day basis. And in that way, we're building an ecosystem of digital inclusion support across the city. So we're looking to increase the capacity of organisations that already work with those communities and embed digital inclusion support within those services in a sustainable way. So this is the base of our community-based approach. So as I mentioned, we work with, you'll see some figures in a moment, but hundreds of different organisations that are offering a variety of different services to people in communities that are more likely to be digitally excluded. They're trusted organisations that people are used to accessing when they need support for a range of different things. They're people that understand the unique and complex needs that the individuals that use their services face, and they can think about digital inclusion as that an enabler. So think about the holistic needs of the individual in a really person-centred way, and then have those positive conversations and support skills and connectivity, etc., in a way that's meaningful for the individual, and also helps that organisation to reach its to realise its outcomes as well. So this is a map of some of the organisations that we have worked with in the last 12 months. I think from memory, I think there's 247 organisations that we've worked with in the last 12 months to be able to understand how digital exclusion can impact on the lives of the people that they work with, and then look at how they can embed that digital inclusion in a way that really meets their needs. That's just in the last 12 months. So there are other organisations that we've done that work with in previous years that aren't included on this map. Of those organisations that we've worked with, we surveyed, no, sorry, that's the next slide. So 247 team services and organisations. As part of that, we've delivered digital inclusion awareness training, which helps those individuals working on the front line to understand about digital exclusion and inclusion. And it also helps us to be more informed about how different people and communities experience exclusion, so that we can put our heads together and look at the best ways to be able to implement that support. As I mentioned, our role is really facilitative. Within that facilitation, a big part of that is looking at the barriers that the organisations face to supporting the people and communities they work with digital inclusion. A lot of the time that is that their staff and volunteers themselves are not digitally included. So we do work around supporting skills and awareness, signposting to other partners, helping organisations to embed digital inclusion within their strategy and action plans, and also to help build their resource and capacity. And a lot of the time that comes in terms of helping organisations to secure funding towards supporting digital inclusion. So in the last 12 months, we've supported organisations, mostly third sector, to secure external funding of over £800,000. And then from those organisations that we work with, we surveyed them. 15% of the partners, it was a short survey window, completed that survey. And these are some of the numbers of the individuals in the community that they have supported. And this doesn't include all of the very light touch support that we know that is integral to some of the people that are facing motivation as a barrier to engaging with some of this support. So people that really need the understanding of how the digital inclusion and use of digital tools and services might benefit them as an individual. All of that needs to happen before they might access the sort of support that's mentioned here, such as digital skills support. But you can see that from just that 15% sample, over 20,000 people have been supported in various different ways. 11,792 people were given a data SIM, 6 months of free data via the National Data Bank, which comes to a value of over £500,000. That's just through the National Data Bank scheme. There were others as well that we haven't included in this report. And over 1,000 people were gifted or borrowed a digital device to support their connectivity as well. And the final slide is just one example of how that kind of support benefits an individual, and how the way that we work allows organisations to be able to be agile and flex their services dependent on the needs of the community. So this is an example from Crossgates and District Good Neighbours scheme, neighbourhood network in Crossgates, but they also run the Crossgates and Winmore Community Hub, which is a service that's open to all ages. They do a lot of work supporting people with that are struggling with cost of living at the moment. Joe was telling me a couple of weeks ago that they've had over 900 families in the last 2 years utilise their food pantry just from that local area. And they've been doing a lot of work embedding digital inclusion into their support, and utilising that food pantry as a way to identify some of the service users that are really struggling financially. And as you can see from this quote, they've been giving away, or for a small charge, lots of different food. But Joe says we got fed up of just giving people what's essentially a sticking plaster. So they started doing cost of living sessions, numeracy sessions, all supported by 100% digital Leeds, giving away digital devices and connectivity, etc. And some of the outcomes that they've seen have been absolutely fantastic. There's just one included here is somebody that got a £19,000 rebate in housing benefits after being able to better use their emails. And I'm now going to hand over to Jason, who's going to talk more about the work we've done.
Thanks, Amy. Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, in terms of the contents of the report, that final slide is a really good segue. Excuse me. So we've included examples in the report and set the context around the wider financial challenge that's being faced across sectors. So the first page proper of the report talks about the financial challenge faced by the council, by the NHS in Leeds, and by the third sector in Leeds, and also some indicators of the cost of living crisis that some of our people and communities are still facing. And as Amy mentioned, we've always pitched and positioned digital inclusion as an enabler to achieving other outcomes. It's not an end in itself. If we digitally included everybody in the city and it didn't make a difference to their lives, what would have been the point of that? It's all about the difference it can make to that person's life. And so as we go through the report, those examples are absolutely pitched in that context. Those are the data, the numbers that Amy included on her slides, and then the examples include the ways that we've worked with some of the organisations in that list of 247, including things like UK Share Prosperity Fund, where 100% Digital Leeds received £400,000, all of that going into the third sector, creating jobs in the third sector for digital inclusion officers within organisations that might not have had that digital inclusion expertise before. So the digital inclusion, the 100% digital team will matrix manage those digital inclusion officers, bring them into our wider network, so accelerate their progress. We have 3 roles confirmed now through UK Share Prosperity Fund, and a 4th one that we're about to confirm, hopefully, within Voluntary Action Leeds soon. But they will have citywide remit looking at different communities of interest, from people with learning disabilities, older people, people of working age, and so on. Multiply funding that we've worked with our colleagues in employment and skills. That's where Amy mentioned that's enabled those community organisations that receive that funding to gift devices and connectivity to people that they identified as being particularly at risk. We've worked with Leeds Older People's Forum on 2 projects, Be Online, Stay Safe. We know that for older people, the fear of scams is one of the things that stops them doing more online, particularly financial transactions online. But we also know that if they can be persuaded and encouraged to take that step, that's when they will see some of those savings. That's when they'll be able to claim unclaimed pension credit, housing benefit, as Amy mentioned on that previous slide. So online safety has been a big focus for the last 12 months for the 100% Digital Leeds team. The Travel Connections project is mentioned there as well. The National Data Bank on the next page, again, Amy referenced that in her presentation, £589,000 worth of free calls, texts and online connectivity through free SIM cards gifted across, I think, 44 community organisations that we've worked with across the city just over the last 12 months. Our work in health and care, although I now see that it says Heath and Care, which is really annoying for me. But our work in health and care, particularly around primary care. So again, as the NHS starts to look at a digital first agenda, we want to make sure that people, as we heard earlier, that connection between health and work and long-term health conditions and deprivation, that people have the opportunity and are supported to use digital health when, where and how they feel it's most appropriate for them, and that they're not excluded simply by their circumstance, by their disability, their income and some of those other issues. And then we look at the tech support that we've received over the last 12 months from the tech sector, which perhaps isn't facing quite the same kind of financial challenge that the council, the NHS and the third sector is facing. And so we are leveraging support from the digital and tech sector in the city to support community organisations across the city. And that comes in the form of funding. We talk about the Digital Ball, which will be in its third year this year. We talk about volunteering and we talk about digital trustees. So the 100% Digital Leeds team playing that convening role with colleagues from Leeds Community Foundation, Voluntary Action Leeds, to bring partners together across sectors to avoid duplication of effort and potentially duplication of spend in a time when nobody has got any spare money to be wasting. That is part of that role that we play. And then as we move towards the end of the report, we talk about how we measure the impact of the work that we do. And over the last 12 months, we've written a number of profiles of the individual organisations that we work with. They're featured in the report and linked through to our website. We also have a couple of academic pieces of research that have been ongoing for the last 12 months. We hoped might be published in time for this scrutiny board, but I think are going to be published within the next 4 to 6 weeks. One looking specifically at health inequalities, led by University College London and funded, as it says, by the National Institute for Health and Care Research. And another looking at a theory of change for digital inclusion programmes across the country that are led by local authority teams. They are few and far between at the moment. As Amy said, Leeds was the first. Coventry more recently have appointed a team. So the research team from Leeds Beckett University looked at 100% Digital Leeds and the Coventry programme in a compare and contrast way, because the Coventry programme is quite new. It's around 12 to 18 months old. And as Amy said, we've been going, I can't do the maths, but since 2018. And what they have produced, although the report isn't published yet, we have had early sight of it. And in Appendix 2, so the final page of the report, is the theory of change that Leeds Beckett are proposing. And it just, I think, serves to illustrate the complexity of the work that we're talking about, the interconnectedness of the relationships with the digital inclusion team leading for the city. And I think that's a really effective graphic that does just show quite how complex digital inclusion is as a policy issue. That's it. Very happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jason, for that very commendable report. When you started, you mentioned at the initial part of your report, the financial pressures you're having. Has that changed how you prioritize your work?
I think it's given us an additional focus. So in previous years, when we've reported to this board and when we were developing our approach and developing our priority areas, areas of focus, both geographically and in terms of some of the communities of interest that we work with, those indicators previously were largely based on those indices of deprivation. I think to a point that was referenced earlier, I think by Councillor Galvani, when we were hearing from Eve in terms of the inclusive growth report, we are well aware that there are pockets of deprivation in what might be considered more affluent areas of the city. And I think the relationships that we have with the organisations that are working either locally, geographically in those places, or might have a citywide remit, but with a focus on a specific community of interest, like older people or people with learning disabilities. That's helping to give us those insights into the data might be telling us one thing, but actually our relationships and our conversations with people on the ground through those intermediaries that we work with are giving us additional insight beyond what the data might be telling us. So that's helping us to focus our work, I think, and Multiply would be a good example of that, where an organization has identified people who would benefit from using digital to improve their numeracy, to then look at things like price comparison sites, to be able to choose a cheaper energy supplier, to be able to understand, is 3 for 2 better than buy one, get one free when you're doing your online shop, some of those sorts of things. And those community organizations that receive Multiply funding were able to identify the people who would most benefit and then gift them a device. So that in the past, very often, we haven't been able to give devices and connectivity away. Multiply has been a really good way of us doing that. And what that does is it gives us that longevity. So it's not just that somebody's coming to a course for 5 or 6 weeks. They might be doing that, but then they also have that device to take away with 2 years of free connectivity. So they can start to apply that learning and use it for things that are going to benefit them outside of the course in their real life. So it's a very long answer to say, I think, yes, it has given us that additional focus.
Thank you very much. That's very comforting. Members, any questions? Yes, Councillor Shazette.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for all the work that you're doing on the report that you've presented, and quite a few of the organisations that I'm involved with are getting help from yourself, and that's great. I just wanted to know, how can other organisations, now you said you're looking at employing other digital officers, how can they actually reach out to you? Because there are some organisations from diverse backgrounds who probably are not aware, and I've had a look at the list and I think there's quite a few missing. And I was wondering, are they not seeking help from you, or are they not, or do they not know how to contact yourself? Because I think lots of people require that help, especially with those that English is a second language. And I think it's very important with everything, whether it's doctor's appointments or anything, even with the cost of living crisis, everything being done digitally now. It's very important that those that are very vulnerable in society can have that opportunity to get that digital inclusion that we are offering as a council. Thank you.
Thank you. I think perhaps a little bit of both. So the example that I would refer to in the report would be the Be Online, Stay Safe project, which was aimed specifically at older people from diverse communities, because we know, particularly from an online safety perspective, if you have English as a second language on top of potentially other barriers, that does make you more nervous to go online, and because you potentially are more likely to fall victim to scams if English is not your first language. So we have done some work. We are doing much more work since Alice has joined our team, who's sitting behind us. We did some work a while ago with looking at the migrant refugee asylum seeker population in the city, and just because of capacity and one thing and another, that tailed off a little bit. We've appointed more officers to our core team over the last 12 months, and Alice is picking up that work. So we're absolutely doing more in that space. I think in terms of organisations who we might or might not be working with, it's probably a little bit of both. So we have 100% digital Leeds website with a contact form on there. Anybody can fill that form in. That email comes directly through to the team, and we would then get in touch with that organisation. There's also perhaps something, though, around the organisation kind of being ready in a sense. So we might have conversations with an organisation who are keen to do something, but because of all of the other pressures that they've got, now might not be the right time. So we are always here. That's one of the things about us being a permanent team, that other councils and other places don't have that luxury. They might be temporary funded for 12 months. So we need to work with the organisations that are ready to do something now. Whereas we are very happy to have a conversation, do some groundwork, and then go away and potentially look for some funding or look for some additional resource, and then pick up that conversation in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, when that organisation might be in a stronger position to actually do the digital inclusion work that they see as a priority. And we will also take a stepped approach as well. So we might look for a very small pot of funding to do a very small targeted intervention, but then use that evidence from that to look for more funding and eventually look at an officer who could be hosted by that organisation, or an officer in a patch who might then work with that organisation. So, for example, in the last 12 months, we've had officers funded by the NHS who've worked geographically, so in a local care partnership area, and they will look at and work with and target the organisations specifically within a ward or a local care partnership area. So could be a little bit of both, but we are always very happy as a 100% digital Leeds team to have a conversation with any organisation, whatever their level of confidence, whoever they're working with, and wherever they're based geographically. Our door is always open.
Thank you very much, Jason. Any other questions, members? Yes, Councillor Flynn.
Thanks, Abby. You seem to have a very wide brief looking at the report, and thank you for that. The superfast broadband coverage in Leeds is very high. It's approaching 100% now, I think. I just wondered what was planned for the very small number of areas that don't appear to be in that lucky sort of band, because it seems to have improved pretty radically over the last sort of few years. If you know where those areas are, I'd be very grateful if you could tell me. On page 32, paragraph 9, talks about the cost of living dashboard. Pretty horrendous figures really for increased usage of universal credit, food banks, and one other, Citizens Advice. And two of those statistics are relatively new. Given the relatively low level of unemployment in Leeds, and the slowly increasing, improving economy, I just wondered if you knew what the reasons for that actually were, and if there were any more. You're pretty much up to date now, actually, but what the reasons for that actually sort of were. And finally, on page 46, paras 112 and 13, the UCL research into health inequalities. You were here during the previous session, I think, and you will know that there's a sort of a crossover. The sample that they've quoted looks to me to be surprisingly small, tiny, in fact. I'm not quite sure what that actually represents. Is that individuals? Because to base the results of any research on 30-odd interviews seems to me to be stretching things a bit. I know it's not your research, but I just wonder what your view on it was. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you. In order. So broadband coverage, we work closely with our colleagues in city development, who have a connectivity board within the council, where all of the major providers, all of the broadband providers report, I want to say every 6 to 8 weeks into that board. I can absolutely get maps and coverage for the whole city. What I do know is that is often one of the indicators that places use as a measure of digital inclusion. And what it doesn't tell you is how many of our people, communities, citizens, residents, how many are taking advantage of that. So we could have 100% high-speed fibre broadband coverage, but if that's priced at £50 a month, we know that there are many people in our communities who are never going to be taking advantage of that. Yeah, please do.
Thanks, Jason. What I forgot to mention was 1 million subscribers of broadband actually came off, and I forgot to mention it before. My apologies for that. I mean, there's a huge availability of sort of Wi-Fi throughout the city and all the rest of it, but I just wonder what the correlation was between people who've got no choice other than to cut their broadband connection off and their access to Wi-Fi or broadband in other sort of locations. If you have any information on that, please, because without it, the opportunities for employment and everything else are pretty minuscule, I would have thought.
Yes, absolutely. Some of the areas that I know, I was asked to report, I want to say last November, to the Outer North East Community Committee. And one of the challenges there was the lack of coverage, because that covers quite a rural area in terms of the number of properties. It might not make commercial sense for providers to lay the lines to connect to high-speed full fibre. Providers often will, the board that I mentioned earlier, which I will speak to, and will get the coverage maps and will report back in terms of where those areas are. Providers will often be quite proud of the work they're doing in terms of putting the pipes in the ground, essentially, they're much less likely to talk about the take up. They will give you the coverage, but probably not say, and this is the percentage of households or residents that are taking up that offer, because that's much more commercially sensitive. So I may well be able to get you the maps of coverage and the kind of not spots as to where the coverage is not strong. I think it's very unlikely that we can get the figures as to how many of our residents are taking up those different offers, but I will certainly report back with the information that we have got. In terms of the cost of living that you mentioned, the question, I think, how do you prioritize? If you have such limited income that you are making the choice between the amount of food you buy, the length of time you have the heating on, and whether you keep your broadband connection, that becomes an invidious choice. And the idea that you would put your broadband connection before food for your children, people are not going to do that. What we do know is that if you are online, you are much more likely to be able to make savings, because you can get the cheap deals, you can get free stuff, you can do things that make your money go further, but that requires that initial outlay. If you do not have the money for that initial outlay, that's where, and it is Amy mentioned that phrase that one of our partners used at Crossgates, the sticking plaster. A free SIM card for 6 months is a sticking plaster, but it might be enough to get you over a crisis. And that 6 months, if that's free data, free calls and free texts at a point at which you're looking for work or needing to manage your universal credit claim or needing to manage health appointments for yourself and your children, that might just be enough. But we are very conscious that it's not a permanent solution. But beyond that, things like Multiply, where we're giving devices and free connectivity for 2 years to some of the people who access those courses through the voluntary organisations that we work with, as you say, it's not a permanent sustainable solution, but sometimes something is better than nothing for people who have next to nothing. And the final one about the University College London research, it's not. So I take your point in terms of the number of interviews and is that a representative sample size on which to base any research, really? But the thing that I maybe should have drawn out more strongly in the report is it's not looking at health inequalities in disadvantaged population groups at a city level. It's looking at the intervention through digital health hubs. So digital health hubs are community organisations that link together digital inclusion support with digital health support. And Amy will correct me if I'm wrong, but we've got around 30 of those in the city. It's something that we started last 12 to 18 months, and we're growing the number of those digital health hubs. So in terms of a city of 800,000 people, 26 interviews is not a huge number, but this is research that's focused on the role that digital health hubs can play in reducing health inequalities. And we've only got around 30 digital health hubs in the city. So in the context of those 30 organisations, the 26 interviews is a bit more representative, but I take your point.
Yeah, I forgot to ask whether the research was purely in Leeds, by the way, or whether it was a national one. Are those hubs sort of based in areas of the most deprivation? In other words, when you get the information out, will it reflect the areas that we're actually trying to look at most?
Thank you. So I'll take this question. So we've worked with the local care partnerships to develop the digital health hubs. And so they've been developed in those areas that the local care partnerships have deemed to be places of need, but also places where the infrastructure is at a certain point that we can start developing that work. So digital health hubs are existing organisations that we've worked with to help them support their ability to support digital inclusion, and then linking with the local primary care networks and also NHS trusts to look at the different digital tools and services that people in that area with the long-term conditions, etc., that are prevalent in that area would be most beneficial to be able to engage with. And they're making sure that the staff and volunteers at those hubs have an understanding of those digital tools and services so that they can better support the people that they're engaged with. So the original digital health hubs were developed in the Beeston Middleton Local Care Partnership, now South Leeds Local Care Partnership. And then we've moved on in waves. So the next level of waves was around the York Road local care partnership, which goes from sort of like Gipton, Bermontofts up to Crossgates. And then Morley, Hatch, which is around Hare Hills, Bermontofts sort of area. Woodsley and Holt Park, which covers Hyde Park, Woodhouse, right up to Wheatwood and Horsforth. Where else? Those other areas. Central North as well. So it's sort of an arc of this around the city at the moment, and then we'll be developing outwards.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed. I know it's not your research, so this is not a criticism of yourselves, but you mentioned a number of organisations that you're asking, and they will always tell you what you want to hear, basically, rather than what the actual situation is in practice, which is why I always like to see interviews with people who are actually using the service rather than the ones that are actually providing it. Because the two will really correlate, and particularly when you're talking about health inequalities. So I know there's very little you can do about that, but it'd be interesting if you could pass the word up the line that when their report is available, some of the questions I'll be asking will be on what you base this report on. 16, 13, whatever it is, users out of how many tens of thousands or 100,000, I think, people who are in deprivation.
Completely take that point. I think final comment, the lead researcher from UCL is a specialist researcher in digital health. So she's been leading the work. We have been, the 100% Digital Leeds team has been part of a steering group. With the funding that she got from the NIHR, she appointed a local researcher to do those on the ground interviews in Leeds. So that local researcher was from Leeds, who lived in some of the communities that we're talking about. And there should absolutely be a mix between staff and volunteers and service users as well, so that if they have different views and that those different views are reported in, that should absolutely feature in the report as well. I would expect it to be published in the next 6 to 8 weeks. I'm very happy to share the link with Becky so it can be circulated to members when it's published. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jason and Amy. Just to say, the food pantry that we run in Little London, we received about 30 free SIMs and free data. Nobody told us where it came from. Obviously, from what you're saying now, I kind of think, and I just thought Santa just loves to come whatever time of the year. So I really just want to say thank you, because the number of residents who have come back with just how happy they are just receiving that free SIM and data has made a huge difference in their lives. Obviously, you know, the vulnerability that we've also got in my neck of the woods. So just to say another huge thank you. And I now know where that has come from, but it was dropped for us without knowing where it came from. So thank you very much for that. Okay, members, any other questions? Just to also ask regarding volunteers, what are we doing to be able to recruit or attract volunteers who would be helping with this digital inclusion program?
So the individual organisations that are delivering the work will have their own volunteer models and be identifying digital volunteers. For example, Aisha, who's based at Better Leeds Communities, that's been working with the digital health hubs across Woodsley and Holt Park, has been working with those organisations to help them look at local people with the digital skills and confidence to be able to support. On top of that, we've been working with Leeds Community Foundation, Voluntary Action Leeds, Forum Central, and the tech companies in Leeds as part of Leeds Digital Volunteering Partnership to look at how we can harness some of the skills and capacity of tech companies that have got corporate social volunteering responsibilities to be able to link up organisations, businesses with local community organisations. So Bermontofts Community Friends, for example, have been partnering with Accenture to be able to offer some of those volunteering hours to be able to support their digital inclusion. And the tech companies have found that really beneficial to be able to send some of their engineers and help them understand more about the digital exclusion within certain communities and how that might impact on the use of the services that they're designing. So we're currently at the point of gathering more case studies and examples of best practice around that to be able to build up that level of volunteering, with the aim of hopefully producing or working out some sort of ongoing system to be able to link those partner businesses with those community organisations that need that support. So sort of dual focus.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. That brings the agenda item to a wrap. I would just like to ask members if you would like to have an update included in our schedule for 24-25. Is that a yes from us? Okay, thank you very much. Jason, can I also ask whether it will be useful to have the scrutiny board engaged in any specific issues you would have with digital inclusion over the next year?
Yes, please. I think to the previous question, if there are any organisations in your wards that you think, I wonder if they're engaged or not. Obviously, you could ask the organisation, but feel free to ask us. We did include a table as Appendix 1, a list of all the organisations we'd worked with in the last 12 months. To your previous point, if you know of some community organisations who you think, well, they're not on that table and I don't know why, please do get in touch with us. We will happily reach out to those organisations. Similarly, communities of interest. If you know, we had the earlier comment about areas of your wards that are experiencing higher deprivation. It can be individual tower blocks, it can be particular communities, older people, people with specific disabilities, or whatever it might be. Again, please do get in touch with myself, with Amy. We'd be very happy to have those conversations and see if we can do some focused work. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Jason, and more specifically on behalf of our elderly community, to say thank you and how much they have been engaged with this program, especially during COVID and post-COVID. So I am looking for some patient volunteers for our elderly population. If you know any, to please send them our way. But just to say a huge thank you for all the hard work you do on this agenda item. So thank you, but you're not allowed to go just yet. Okay, we're almost done. Agenda item number 9. At the end of each municipal year, our scrutiny board publishes an end of year summary, and the statements are published on the council's website and feed into the annual report on scrutiny, which is considered at July's meeting. So that will be July of this year. So the summary includes the work program for the municipal year with links to the meeting web pages and webcasts. It also includes a statement from the chair reflecting on the key priorities of the scrutiny board over the last year. So the summary of that, it's in your pack on page 51, and my statement is on page 58 for your perusal. So yes, this is our last meeting for the year, and I would like to reiterate again my sincere thanks to each and every one of you for your engagement and over the challenges we've had over the year, but we have been able to pull through the last 12 months. So that's also reflected in my summary that's attached in your pack. So on behalf of the board, again, just to say another huge thank you to each and every one of you. So over to Becky now, just to give us
Sure.
Yeah, you will like say something, sure.
Thanks very much, Abby. I just, from a personal point of view, and I know from people on the committee, I'd like to thank you for the way you've chaired this board over, in my case, just for 12 months, and failing courtesy, not to mention your breakfasts, which are renowned. I want to wish you the very best of luck for next year. I'm sure you won't need it, but thank you very much indeed for what you've done for the committee members here. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all your kind words. Appreciate it. Okay, so agenda item number 10, Becky.
Agenda item 10 includes a draft work programme for 24-25. If there are other issues members would like to include on the work programme for next year, for those of you who are wanting to remain on the board, if you could just let me know in the next couple of weeks, and I'll try and make sure I work with the officers to build those in.
Elections next year.
Yeah, just a quick one, actually. I've had some correspondence again from the chap who represents the motorcyclists. And I did some quick work on this, and this is the motorcycles in bus lanes thing. And they requested first that we looked at this on the 19th of June, 2019. And we started looking at it on the 4th of September, 2019. And it's now 5 years later, and it's still not fully resolved. Could we look at this, please?
It's a yes. Thank you.
Just on that point, in what respect are you saying it's not resolved? Because we've had various reports about the trial and everything and how well it's been going. Are you talking about it's not spread further than the trial?
No, apparently there are all sorts of problems, including, for example, he writes here that I think traffic planners probably forgot that learner bikes can't use the inner ring road or the M62 when they install all the bus gates. He goes on about the difficulties of this, but apparently it's not expanded beyond the trial, and other councils, including Kirklees, are waiting to see what Leeds does, and it all seems to have got held up.
Okay, just before we respond, Jason and Amy, it's okay for you to go now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Hamilton.
At the last scrutiny, it was in the report, and I did raise regarding, they said they had a successful trial using the A65 and that it wasn't going to be rolled out. I'm sure that's what was said. I'm sure that was successful and they'll continue there, but I'm sure, could be wrong, but it wasn't going to be rolled out, was it? So we did, I mean, you can raise it again, but I think we did get the answer from Gary.
Yeah, another thing about the motorbikes, I did ask how representative they were. Now, if we do this again, it might be worth inviting this gentleman to the meeting and get the view of motorbikes. On a different issue about the state of the roads, I got an email from a motorcyclist, and I was grateful for it because I'm a car driver. I don't ride a bike, so it's a totally different approach I have to roads than a motorcyclist has. So it's useful to get that viewpoint. But I think sort of invite this guy, if you can pass the details on to Becky and do cover it again. I know, yeah, they're saying the trial was successful. I can't remember whether they're saying they were rolling it out or not. But yeah, it doesn't seem to cause much of a problem. I use the A65 regularly, as do a few of us around here. You know, it doesn't seem to cause many issues there. But there is the question about Inner Ring Road and parts of the M62. Yeah, for learners, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gavani. And I do have that email from yourself, Councillor Buckley, and Gary's aware of it. So I will ensure that you get a response to that as well. Thank you very much. Okay, our next meeting is for the 26th of June, 2024 at 10:30 a.m. and a pre-meeting for 10:15. And best of luck to all members who are restanding, and see you all soon.